Hi everyone, welcome to Make It Monday. My name is Angie. So this month we are going to create a mandala design with dot painting. This is what we're going to create. It's going to look like this when we're finished, and I'll walk you through the steps to get there. So I'm going to set this aside. What we're starting with is a 4x4 canvas board. It just means it's canvas wrapped around a board. And what I did is just took some plain acrylic paint and painted it black. So that's the first step. So to speed things up, this is what it's kind of going to look like. And I'm going to show you how we're going to get to this portion of it. So the first thing you need to do is to kind of find your center. And I found instead of trying to freehand this, it was really helpful to have these guidelines in place while I was painting. So I'm going to show you, I prepped the canvas ahead of time, but I'm going to show you on a piece of black cardstock how I got to that point. So what I did is I took just a plain white colored pencil and a ruler, and the lines, as you can see, don't need to go all the way to the corners, but you want them out far enough. You don't want them to really show when you're finished. So what I do is I just about 3/4 of an inch in, you're going to draw a line and stop before you get to the corner. And then you're going to do the same thing on this side here, about 3/4 of an inch in, and come in. And then you need a line straight across each side. So I have a T-square ruler. I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but you can line that T-square ruler up right against the edge of your paper so that you know you're straight. And then I'm going to take and draw another line this direction. Again, stopping a little before the edges. And we're going to take a line and draw it this direction. So that's how I started. And then I found that it was really hard to keep my circles even. So I wanted some guidelines so that my circles were straighter and not so wonky. So what I did is I took some pieces of paper and cut them into circle shapes. So the sizes that I have are 3/4 of an inch, 1 1/4 inch, 1 3/4 of an inch, and 2 1/4 inches. And I'll have all that listed in the description box below. So what I did is I took the circles, I folded them in half and folded them in half again so that I would have a center point. And then what I did is I lined up the fold with the center line and the straight half edge with that line. And then I can take and just draw some guidelines around. And then what I did is I flipped it over and did the same thing on the other side. I guess they make like a stencil that you can do this with. I didn't want to bother to purchase that. I figured this was just as easy. And so then I would take my next circle and I would do the same thing. And you keep going until you have 4 different circle guidelines on there. So that's how we get to this point here. So now our canvas is prepped and ready to go. Now I want to talk a little bit about the paint that we're going to use. So this is just acrylic paint that you find at the craft store. I found that this DecoArt Americana brand is really good straight out of the bottle. I also have some folk art paint, but it was a little bit thicker. So I did some research online, and if your paint is a little bit thicker, you can add what they call a pouring medium to the paint. And so I just have a little dropper that I just put a couple drops in the different colors that were a little bit thick. What you want is for your paint, I have mine all mixed up and in a tray here, is it to kind of form a little bit of a peak when you pull it up, but for that peak to settle out. So that's kind of what you're looking for in the paint. So that's the paint. And then there's different items that you can use to paint your dots with. For my bigger dots, I was having a hard time finding something bigger. They do make dot printing tools. My husband has a 3D printer, so I just had him print these up for me in the sizes that I wanted so that I can do the bigger dots. That was the hardest thing, was to find something around the house that I could use for the bigger dots. The other things you can use are, like, I'm going to use the ends of the paintbrushes, so the back end of the paintbrushes, a skewer, and then a toothpick. So just most of it is everyday items, depends on how big you want your circles. The other thing you can use is like the, I would use a newer pencil eraser, but you can use the back pencil eraser as a dot. And then what I do is I kind of audition the dots so that I know how big they're going to be. So like this first line, I used a toothpick. This second line, I used a skewer. And I had skewers in 2 different sizes. So I had one that was a little bit wider than the other. I found that the tips on the 2 were not much different. This was like the small skewer. This was the large skewer. This next set of lines is the back end of this smaller paintbrush. And then this one is the bigger end of a back end of the bigger paintbrush. Sorry, tripping over my tongue here. This is like the back end of the skewer, the flat end. And then this was the larger skewer, the flat end. And then this was a pencil eraser. So this gives me kind of the idea of what size those dots are going to be. And the reason I graduated down is I just dipped it in paint once and then just dot, 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 dot without loading any more paint. And that also gives you graduated sizes of dots. So that's something to keep in mind. And we're going to do that when we come up to the end pieces here on the design. So that is a little bit about dots. When choosing your colors, this took me a little bit to figure out too. When you're doing a mandala design, it's nice to have whatever is in the center, that you pull those colors out throughout the design. So like the pink I have in the center, I have it on these bigger dots here, but then I also have it on the final layer out here. And then I kind of like to have a neutral, and that's my white color, and that also is pulled out. So this is kind of a pastel rainbow. So if you think of Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. I didn't use any violet. But so the pink takes place in my red, and then I came in with the neutral. Then orange, yellow, then again the neutral came in with the white, green, and then I brought the pink back out, and again my neutral, and then my blue, and then I went back to my center color. So that's kind of how I chose my colors. If you look like on Pinterest or things like that, you will find a lot of color variations. Just put in like color samples or color swatches. You will find a lot of inspiration to use as far as choosing your colors. All right, so we are going to get started with our painting. I'm going to try and keep everything centered here. So we have our lines on there. So we are all set to get started. I need one more toothpick out here than what I have. So I'm just going to grab a couple more toothpicks quick. And we're going to start. Okay, so a couple things you might want to keep on hand is a small glass of water to just kind of rinse your tools off with, and some paper towels. And then I also like to keep a piece of scrap paper handy. I do this because, like, when I first start dot painting, it's sometimes nice to dab it off a little bit on a piece of paper. So I will And you just want to load the base. You don't need, I'm going to try and hold this up without dripping it. You don't need much paint on there. You can see it's not. And then when you push down, you don't want to like do CPR. You don't want to, push really hard. What you want to do is do a gentle touch just where you can kind of see the paint coming out and then pull straight up. So again, go straight down with just a gentle, like I said, you don't want to push down hard, and then you just want to pull up. And so this is why I keep, now I'm running out of paint. This is why I keep a piece of scrap paper handy so that I can kind of gauge how my dots are going to go. And it's helpful to practice on that before you start. Okay, so we're going to start with our center dot. And as I paint, I may take and put some of it to music so that you can see the whole dot painting process without having to listen to me talk through each thing. So we're going to start with our center dot, and I'll walk you through the first few layers just so that they make sense. So I'm going to very carefully try and place this as much in the center as I can. I'm going to gently push down till I can kind of see the paint, and I'm going to pull straight up. Then I'm going to just rinse my tool off a little bit in some water, and then just wipe it off with a paper towel. And my paint may stain my tools a little bit, but it's not going to hurt them any. Okay, so we have our first dot on there. So the next one we're going to do is the white dot. So the white dot that we have is going to go, so you see these little dividers here? We're going to put one white dot in each of these areas. And like I said, having the lines there helps you keep everything centered. So again, I'm going to dip my paintbrush, and I just need a little bit. And again, I'm going to just test it a little bit on here. Then I'm going to dip it again. And I'm going to put one dot right there. And then for these dots, I'm going to dip each time. I'm not going to dip very far into that paint. And I'm going to do that. And then I like to spin my work a little bit as I'm working. It just makes it a little bit easier for me. And I will say it took me 4 or 5 times of doing this design and practicing to get this design the way I wanted it. So if you're worried about doing it directly on your canvas, take a piece of black construction paper, whatever, and practice. I will say that the practice really helps. And then the other thing to be careful of, if you could let it dry in between. I'm going to keep going while it's wet and be very careful that I don't stick my hands in the wet paint. Okay, so we've got our white dots on there. Next, we are going to move to our orange dots. And those orange dots are going to go, they're going to kind of be centered in between the white dots, right on the line. And this is where these lines are super helpful to have those there. Okay. And then as far as they're going to go, as the circle lines go, it's going to go like right at the base of that circle line. So let me put one on there, and then I'll try and hold this up a little bit so you can see it. Again, I'm going to test to make sure I have enough paint on there. I need to put a little bit more. That's a little bit better. Okay. So that dot's going to go right there. So I'm going to try and bring this up carefully so you can kind of see where that goes. And then I sometimes, with this, when I'm on the lines, I like to go opposite. And I think that's just my preference. I don't think there is a right or wrong way to do this. I just feel like I can keep things even by doing it this way. And I really hope my hand is not too much in the way. Okay. So I'm going to go opposite again. I'm going to put that dot right there. And then I'm going to do the in-between dots. Yep, let me move that back up again. I hope I didn't get too far off camera. And sometimes your dots are a little bigger than your other dots. Again, sometimes it depends on how much paint you have on your paintbrush. Like I said, it's not, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, those lines are there for a guide. Okay. So on my design, what I did is then I came back with a toothpick and did small little dots in between those orange dots. So I'm going to grab my toothpick here. Get some paint on there, and I just dip straight up and down. And again, I'm going to go on my scratch paper. And so I'm just going to put one dot in between each of the bigger orange dots. So it's kind of going to line up right where that white dot is. Okay, moving on. All right, our next dots are the yellow ones. And again, we're going to use the end of this large paintbrush. I call it the large one just because that one's really small. Okay, so for the yellow dots, it's going to be 2 dots in this section, kind of in between the orange dots. So it's going to be a yellow dot here and a yellow dot here. And I will again lift up this once I get a couple on there. A little bit more paint than I had. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to do a yellow dot there. And a yellow dot there. And again, I'm going to try and hold this up to the camera. Hopefully it's not going blurry. So you can kind of see how that's placed. All right, I'm going to continue to place the yellow dots. Okay, so we are now ready for our next layer of white dots. And these, let me see here. Again, I am going to use my larger white brush. And those dots, we're going to start out with on the line again. So we're going to start putting a white dot here, a white dot here, a white dot here, and then we're going to fill in between with dots. But it's nice to center the dots on these white lines. It just will help keep everything even. I'm going to spin my paint around. And again, I'll hold it up to the camera so you can kind of see where they're placed. Okay. Okay, we are ready for our green dots next. And the green dots are going to go in between the white dots. And you can see that some of my white dots are not perfect. By the time you get the whole design done, you will not really notice that. So our green dots, again, are going to go in this quadrant of the circle. 2 dots, 1 dot here, 1 dot here. And again, I will hold that up to the camera so you can see that a little bit better. Okay, we are ready to move on to our bigger pink dots. And these bigger pink dots are going to kind of go right at the crosshairs in between the green on these lines. So not in between these ones. And I'll show, again, I'll hold it up to the camera. So it's going to go right there. And you need to make sure, because this is going to be a bigger dot again, that you make sure. So if you go pretty much right on the crosshairs, you should be able to be just fine. And you're going to do that on each line. And again, I will hold that up to the camera once I get that on. And I'm using the smaller of my dot tools. So again, I'm going to test this out a little bit to make sure I've got enough paint. And we're going to place these dots. Okay, we are now going to do what we call some running dots. It means you will place a dot and then you will load up your brush, you will place a dot, You will load up your brush again, and then you will walk the dot around these pink circles. And you can see that as you walk the dots back, they are going to get smaller. And that's the look that we're going for. So we're going to start with our white. And the first dot, and hopefully your lines, I noticed I have one line here that's not quite out far enough, but I think I can fake it enough that it'll work. But it's gonna, the first white dot's gonna go straight on that line there. So straight on this line. Looks like I dripped some pink paint. I'll just go over that with some black paint. Okay, so let's see. To look at my size chart here to decide which. I think I'm going to go with my paintbrush with the bigger end. Okay, so I'm going to load my paintbrush first. Again, I'm going to try it out. So I'm going to load it to do the first dot. Okay. And then I'm going to load it again, and I'm going to do 4 dots in a row. So I'm going to load my paintbrush. I'm going to go in a little bit and down from the first one, and go 1, 2, whoop, I'm not going to have room for 4, so we're going to do 3. This paintbrush I think is a little bigger than the one I used on my original design. And then I'm going to load up my paintbrush. And sometimes I just need to turn this so I can see it a little bit better. And then 1, 2, 3. And we're going to do that around each of the pink dots. And I'm trying to stop where this line is here. Okay, we are ready to move on to our blue dots. And the blue dots are going to be done very similar to these white dots, where you load one at the end and do it and then work your way around. And the goal is to kind of end up, there's that last circle line. It's kind of to end right there. And as you can see, like, they're not totally perfect on there, and that is just fine. So we're going to start with our blue dots. Again, I'm going to test it on my scrap paper. Make sure I've got enough paint. There we go. Can place one right on the line. And then how many you do around, let's see, what did I do here? 1, 2, 3, 4. I did 5 on that one, I think. So 5 or 6, depending on how big your dots are and how far around you can go. So I'll load here, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we'll do 6. We'll bring it past that line 1 so it kind of ends up in between the 2 greens. And some of this is a guessing game. You know, you just have to try it and see. 4, 5, 6. Yep, 6 works really well. Okay, we are ready for our final row of dots. And these are going to be a half row. So the thing you need to make sure is that you're going the same direction on each one. So I will start again straight behind that blue one, but I'm only going to go one direction, and I am going to use a toothpick for this, and it will be out of the pink paint. And I did 6 dots. So I loaded the first one and then went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you should somewhat end up between these 2 blue dots, but not all the way down. And this just gives the piece kind of movement. I thought they were kind of fun to just do them on one side like that. So again, I'm going to test my dots a little bit. Make sure I've got enough paint on my toothpick here. Sometimes you need to dip it a few times to get the paint in a good spot. So again, I'm going to put 1 at the very end. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to turn my piece and do the same thing. Okay, so our dot painting piece is finished. You just need to let it set aside to dry really well. Like you can see, there's still bubbles of paint in the pink area. It's just because there's more paint there. They will dry. So you just need to set it aside and give everything time to dry. The thing I want to mention is, so sometimes you can still see a little bit of the white pencil lines. What I recommend doing, and you need to make sure your paint is fully dry. If you have an eraser like this with a very clean tip, you can very gently go in once the paint is dry and kind of erase those pencil lines that you still see. I did that somewhat on this. Again, you can still see a few of them, but for the most part, you don't notice them. So that is dot painting. I hope you enjoyed this. Give it a try with some other designs. So thank you, and we will see you next month for another Make It Monday. Bye, everybody.